I'm sharing this my presentation on increasing land degradation, which is one of the major challenges in our efforts to ensure future food security and also improve livelihoods of smallholders. Land degradation, we mean that a temporary or permanent decline in productive capacity of the land or its potential for environmental management. For most of the practical purposes, in general, like in case of soil erosion or advanced salination, land degradation is irreversible during our lifespan. Therefore, we need to take care of our lands. One of the most important studies, that is a global land assessment of degradation, has shown land degradation a global issue. Out of around 8.5 billion hectares under cropland, pastures and forest, around 23%, that is around 2 billion hectares cropland is degraded. Nearly half of this vegetated area is under forest and around 18% of forest land is degraded. Around 3.2 billion hectares are under pastures and around 21% land is degraded. And around 1.5 billion hectares are under cropland and 30% of croplands are degraded. Cropland degradation is most extensive in Africa, affecting around 65% of croplands as compared to 38% in Asia. Water and wind erosions are one of the major causes for land degradation, most of the land degradation. Chemical degradation like nutrient mining, carbon depletion doesn't contribute much to the global land degradation as such, but as regards to cropland, 40% of croplands are degraded because of this soil chemical degradation, that is soil nutrient removals and carbon removals. An assessment of total cost of land degradation in a study has been estimated to around 300 billion USD per annum, and around 50% of this cost of land degradation is attributed to supporting and regulating services of soils like carbon sequestration and water quality supply, and therefore the cost of land degradation doesn't come only to the landholder but also to the general public as such. Now I will talk something about drylands, where our most of the work is focused. Drylands cover 40% of world land surface, and around 50% of rain-fed crop land in drylands are degraded. Drylands are losing around 23 hectares per minute, and therefore we are compromising with around 20 million tons of production capacity per year in drylands. Drylands are very fragile ecosystems and are vulnerable to projected climate change, as Dr. Kishore has indicated in the beginning. And drylands are home to around 2.5 billion people, and 40% of population each in Asia as well as in Africa lives in drylands, and so their livelihoods at stake, and therefore land degradation needs to be a priority in our action. As regards impacts of land degradation, the loss in productivity potential is the first things that happens, and another effects of land degradation may be due to increase in inputs to maintain same yield levels, or conversion of land into low value uses, or even abandoning some of the plots, are some of the effects of land degradation. And productivity loss due to land degradation only in drylands have been estimated to around 13 to 28 billion US dollars per year. And we see here in these figures also, land degradation is one of the major factors for large yield gaps, around 2 to 4 in drylands. And we have seen here in our on-station study research that with proper land management and including nutrient management and along with crop management, we can increase productivity in drylands by 5-folds. As regards soils, the first thing in our mind comes regarding only crop production, and we lose sight of ecosystem services which are rendered by soils. Soils are largest reservoir of terrestrial carbon, holding much more carbon than what is contained in atmosphere or vegetation combined together. And soils have very important role in regulating climatic processes through regulating emissions of gases like CO2, methane and nitrous oxide. And just to highlight the gravity of the situation, I would like, as Dr. Kishore has already indicated, CO2 level in atmosphere have reached a level of 400 ppm from around 320 to 330 during his lifespan only. Similarly, methane emissions have increased from 60 around 350 million ton carbon dioxide equivalent to around 500 million ton carbon dioxide equivalent as of the day. As regards nitrous oxide also, agriculture soils are the largest contributor, contributing around 80% of the total anthropogenic and nitrous oxide emissions. And therefore, in context of this widespread land degradation and in our efforts to deal with climate change scenarios, addressing land degradation issues needs to be priority issues today. Land degradation have enormous effect on affecting water quality as well as water supply. Our soils are largest water filters as well as storage tanks. Soils have enormous capacity of regulating contaminants through adsorption on soil colloidal surfaces as well as microbial transformations. In addition, soils are storehouse of nutrients and transformation of organic materials and medium of root growth, in addition to other services as well. As I indicated in the beginning that chemical soil degradation, that is nutrient removals and salinization, it accounts for more than 40% of crop land degradation. And here I want to share that in our studies also in pilots across different states in India and extensively in Karnataka, we collected around 1 lakh soil samples, around 100,000 soil samples, and we analyzed samples here, and we observed that this sort of degradation is still higher in our dryland croplands. We observed widespread deficiencies of secondary and micronutrients varying somewhere from 50 to 100% farmers' fields, which most of the farmers and stakeholders are not aware of. And keeping in mind the essentiality of secondary and micronutrients as well, these are the major stumbling block for realizing productivity potential. And this is what basically we have adopted in our efforts, in soil rejuvenation efforts, to optimize the quantities of nitrogen and phosphatic fertilizers and include deficient secondary and micronutrients. And this we have done in Bhuchetana and in other pilots across different states, and we have seen productivity improvement by this land rejuvenation measure varying from 20 to 70%, and economically this was remunerative, resulting a benefit of rupees 3 to 15 for 1 rupee invested on land rejuvenation efforts. For sustainability, our soil processes need to operate within operating limits. That is what we call as planetary boundaries. And as of now, our nitrogen cycle, climate change processes are operating beyond these safe limits. If quickly I put some facts that from late 60s till date, crop production globally has increased more than 1.5 times, but that is associated with an increase in nitrogen fertilizer around 7 times. And in India, also our productivity from 60s increased almost doubled, but that is accompanied by an increase in nitrogen fertilizer around 13 times. So nitrogen fertilizer based pollution is an issue in all agricultural lands globally. Inefficient N-based pollution due to greenhouse gases emission as well as leaching of nitrates in surface and groundwater is a serious issue. Because of how high quantity of nitrogen fertilizer used, nitrogen use efficiencies has decreased drastically in all agriculture regions. And in our studies, in on station as well as on farm, we observed that our land management efforts, where we supply need-based fertilizers, have significantly increased nitrogen uptake use efficiency, which indicates efficiency of plants in obtaining nitrogen from soil, as well as nitrogen utilization efficiency, which indicates efficiency of plants in translocating N uptake into grains, as well as N use efficiency, which indicates kg grain produced per unit of N, as well as nitrogen harvest index, which indicates food grain quality as such. I will share some of the experience of watershed management work that we are doing. In India as such, around 114 million hectare land is degraded, and water erosion and vegetation degradation due to water erosion is one of the major factors. And in our studies, we have found that management at watershed catchment scale is one of the very trusted approach to manage our soil and water resources. With simple structure of in situ and ex situ water conservation, so runoff is drastically reduced, as is seen here in this table. And we could see that soil loss, which was in some untreated areas somewhere around 3.48 ton per hectare in Kothapalli watershed, reduced significantly to 1.62 ton per hectare after watershed implementation. And the experience from our on-station work also indicated that the soil loss, which was somewhere around 6.64 ton per hectare in a non-watershed area, is reduced to 1.60 ton per hectare where we are implementing watershed practices. Already I have indicated that soils are biggest reservoir of carbon. Soils contain as high as around 2,500 billion tons of carbon as compared to only 600 billion ton in vegetation and only 750 billion ton in atmosphere. During last 4-5 decades, soils have lost most of the carbon because of mismanagement and misuse of soil resources. Most of the soil resources have lost around 70 to 90 billion tons of carbon due to this management in only 4-5 decades. And various studies have estimated that there is a global potential of sequestering carbon in various lands because of degradation and other factors. We can sequester around 2 billion tons of carbon per year globally. And if we are able to increase only 10% of carbon in our soils by this century, then this can lead to drawdown of atmospheric CO2 somewhere around 100 to 110 ppm, and that will reduce atmospheric CO2 level far below 350 ppm, which is generally considered as a safe limit of atmospheric CO2 levels. Soil organic carbon is not only important from climate point of view, it is important for crop production because it affects soil physical properties, chemical properties, biological properties, which are very important for soil processes. And we have observed in our studies that our soils are widely degraded with respect to soil carbon, and this figure shows our result from pilots in Andhra Pradesh, and here we can see that 40% to around 90% soils are depleted in soil carbon, and this is one of the major factors for low crop yields in drylands as well. In our on-farm studies, we have found that with improved land management, including micronutrients and crop management, it is not only yields which is increasing, but carbon is also increased. During a 24 periods, around 7 ton carbon per hectare was sequestered, around 330 kg per hectare per year. And other studies have also shown that if we are able to sequester 1 ton carbon per hectare, that will lead to increase in productivity somewhere from 20 to 400 kg per hectare. And if we are able to increase only 1 ton per hectare, we can increase food grain production in dryland somewhere from 30 to 50 million ton per hectare, million ton in drylands. Soil microbes are very important for soil health because they do undertake all transformation, nutrient transformation. Without microbes, if any nutrient is there in soil, that may not be transformed into available forms. And soil microbial biomass carbon as such indicate soil quality. This is surrogate for soil quality. And when we do adopt these improved land management practices, including micronutrient crop management, we found that this microbial soil carbon increases significantly. And considering these benefits of rejuvenating degraded lands, we are scaling out this thing in various initiatives, and we have adopted soil rejuvenation as our entry point activity for harnessing the low-hanging fruits and also taking on board the farmers for our initiative in upgrading agriculture. As of now, we have implemented this intervention in around 7 million hectares, benefiting around 5 million families. Considering low levels of organic carbon, we are also promoting recycling on farm base, and we are employing microbial consortia culture and earthworms for converting organics and adding into soils. As Kaushal has already indicated, cultivation of post-rainy fallows and rainy fallows. Soil fertility degradation is one of the major factors to take 2 crops, and that is what we are promoting in these fallows, to take 2 crops and increase farmers' benefits. And we have seen that this is most important for exploiting varietal potential as well as shifting to high-value agriculture. And this land rejuvenation doesn't increase only yields and environmental benefits, but also water use efficiency is increased. And we have seen benefits in succeeding season up to 3 seasons and leads to resilience building, and produce quality is also increased. Now I can very nicely conclude that soils are the foundations for food production and food security. Soils are the biggest water filters and water storage tanks. Soils contain more carbon than above ground vegetation and atmosphere and play important role in regulating climatic processes. And soils host a tremendous variety of organisms. Therefore, we need to enhance our efforts in minimizing degradation of soils and restore the soils which are already degraded. We need to stabilize our global stores of soil organic carbon. We need to optimize our nitrogen and phosphorus inputs and go for need-based fertilizer management, and also improve our knowledge about the current status of our soils to take corrective measures. Thank you.
Open for clarification. Yes, please.
So, what are the reasons you attribute because of increase in nitrogen efficiency in your soil experiment? Because you are applying same nitrogen for all the treatments.
Right, yes. Actually, in our treatments, we also included deficient secondary micronutrients. Our soils are, as we showed in that slide, our soils are imbalanced now in nutrient contents. There are widespread deficiency of secondary micronutrients, and we are not adding those secondary micronutrients, and that is affecting metabolic activities of plants. When all nutrients are supplied in same amount, in required amounts and required proportion, that improves plants' metabolic activities and improves nitrogen use efficiency.
Girish, really nice talk. Two issues. To build soil carbon, you have to also have inputs of nutrients. So there's a cost to building soil carbon. So have you done that analysis? And a very impressive set of data you presented. Does those measurements of soil data, have they fed into our modelling capability, or are you looking at seeing whether our models can reproduce what you're finding in your experimental work?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because this work was some of the part of done earlier with the ICR. We had a National Agriculture Technology project in which we had basically 5 organizations working together. The whole India mapping was done for the carbon. The good management practices were identified which are in particular different regions, and NBSS LUP has worked on the carbon modeling using this data. So they have incorporated this into the century model as well as also the Rothsey model, state carbon model. But we ourselves have not really much ventured into the carbon as such, other than the TSAT subroutine what we are using that one.
And what about the cost of increasing soil carbon?
What we are looking at this cost basically, as we said, that the cost benefit ratio in terms of even the food produced itself is economically remunerative for the farmer. So it is an indirect benefit which is coming up. But if we are able to do that as on a larger scale, then we are able to do the carbon unit sale also. And it has been done in Hyderabad. We did it in a forestry land, the degraded land where we could undertake the plantations. And then the World Bank was able to buy the carbon units from the project as such.
Hello. I'm in the back bench. Chairman couldn't see me. Thank you very much, Girish, for the very nice presentation. One thing, our senior colleague, Sharawat, always used to point out boron. So we also pointed out 60 to 98% of the Indian soils are lacking boron.
Right.
But in your concluding things, the putting boron, you used to always mention, that's going to really, high value crops and low value crops, right, is going to make a significant change. And let us consider his advice.
Yes, sir. Right, sir. Yeah, right.
I wanted to ask you something regarding the biodiversity loss. We had a project in West Africa on desert margin program where we're looking at land degradation, but also the effect on the biodiversity loss. Did you look at, did you have to see something, look at something like that?
Actually, sir, we are not looking into biodiversity loss. Dr. Vani can.
That work we have done it earlier before the Girish joined the team in the watersheds in Rajasthan. We have completely looked at the assessment of the biodiversity below ground, above ground, with rehabilitation and the normal degraded land. And it has shown quite clearly that there were at least new species, about 30 to 35 plant species were rejuvenated onto the rejuvenated land, in addition to the microbial diversity also which was there. Not only that, even the wildlife also got re-established because that plot was very big. It was something like 50-hectare plot which we had rehabilitated in the Bundi watershed, which was supported by Asian Development Bank and then subsequently taken over by the Tata Trust.